Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Nick Wilson. I'm the label manager for Australia's longest running electronic music arts collective and label, Clan Analogue. Now, I'd firstly like to begin tonight's live stream by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're talking to you from. And of course, it's important being today the day when we announce the date of a referendum on an Indigenous voice to Parliament and to government. So I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people whose land I'm talking to you from in Naarm, also known as Melbourne. And I'd like to acknowledge the impact that this year's debate will be having on Indigenous communities throughout Australia, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Also acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and hope that this year will see some small progress towards widespread acknowledgement of that sovereignty. So let's get on to what tonight's all about. I would also like to welcome actually not just people in Australia, but anyone tuning into this live stream overseas. And particular welcome if you're not yet familiar with Clan Analogue, please feel free to check out further what we do. So tonight's live stream is really to bring you some very exciting announcements about, well, I hesitate to use the word project, because project would suggest that this is something planned, something premeditated, when quite the opposite is true. We feel like we've been perhaps called upon or had some responsibility thrust upon us through circumstance. And so I prefer to call it an endeavour. And that endeavour is to bring to you, Clan Analogue's listeners, what we have come to term the Future Security Agency Decryptions. Now, some of you may know a little bit about this already from some announcements we made last year, but I also am aware that some of you may not have heard anything about this at all. So the first thing we're going to do tonight is give you a brief recap on how we got to this point today, and also maybe listen to some snippets of audio related to the project. A bit later on, we're going to be joined by one of the artists who has been involved in the decryption effort, the effort to bring this audio to you, the listener, and that's Cable 54, who will be joining us from Adelaide. And we would also like tonight to make some new announcements about where we are going and the new developments that have recently occurred, some very exciting developments, and how you can help us out, you the listener, because we really welcome your involvement to take this journey to the next stage. So let's begin by telling you a bit about where we got to this point so far. So in the middle of 2021, we were contacted by an anonymous source. This person had some data to share with us. Now, we weren't really quite sure at first why they contacted us specifically, but as things unfolded, we realized that our unique expertise at Clan Analogue lies in both the areas of music, particularly music of I guess you could call it emerging forms of music, the music at the cutting edge of developments in technology, and also our expertise with technology and technological developments more generally. So our source was looking for music technicians, and that's why I believe they came to us. Now, I started by talking to our IT manager, Duncan Robertson, and he expressed some reluctance, or indeed some skepticism at first, about this strange data. However, we decided we would investigate it further. Now, Duncan was concerned about wider network contamination, so he set up a rack server mounted within a Faraday cage. So this was designed to prevent any form of wider contamination to our network, should this data be in some way hostile in nature. So we set that up, and then we started to examine the data. Now, at first, it was really incomprehensible. We had no idea what the format of it was or the morphology of it. But as we examined it further, indeed, patterns started to become apparent that did resemble that of audio. In fact, some of the regularity of the patterning and the various patterns emerging within our analysis indicated some correlations with music. So this piqued our interest, of course, but we couldn't really work out what the format of these files were. As it transpired, it became apparent that they were ultra-high resolution quantum audio files in a format that we have never previously encountered. This required a fair bit of analytical effort involved to try to actually work out could we actually get any sound that we could actually perceive from this data. At the time, I recall Duncan saying to me that this was like trying to solve a 4-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Now, we eventually were able to get enough information from this data to be able to at least do something with it. We recruited at this point some of our most adaptable and innovative artists to help us turn this raw data into something perceivable within the audio frequency spectrum. And we released that last year under the name of Partial Decryptions. And in fact, while we were waiting for this stream to begin, you may have heard a little bit of one of those. The one that we were hearing earlier this evening was by the artist G.J. Hanna, who had decrypted that particular portion of the audio. Now, since we released that, well, perhaps I should first of all show you, in case you haven't seen that already, I'll show you what the release in case you were wanting to check it out further. That's so I'm just going to navigate across to our Bandcamp page, and so that's the partial decryptions. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit further about this image here shortly, but if you do want to have a listen, the partial decryptions is available on our Bandcamp page. Now, since we released that, we've had a bunch of inquiries from people. People are asking, well, the 5 artists in question who worked on that were given some audio from our IT manager, Duncan Robinson. What was that audio prior to their involvement? So the 5 artists in question, by the way, I should just acknowledge them. They were Chambers, Tim Marcus Moore, Cable 54, who's going to join us shortly, Reductionist, and G.J. Hanna. And I should also acknowledge like a conflict of interest, perhaps, in that I am actually Reductionist. That's my artist name when I'm not managing the label. So it was an interesting question. What were these 5 artists given to turn into what we now hear as the partial decryptions? Now, as I mentioned earlier, the audio was in an ultra-high resolution quantum audio format that we have not yet encountered. So to say what does it sound like is a bit like saying what does a rainbow sound like? It's an interesting question, but a little bit hard to answer. We had to make a whole lot of assumptions when we were transferring the data patterns from these files into the kinds of audio formats that we're more used to dealing with, such as WAV files and so on. So what we've done just recently, we'd like to first of all announce this tonight, is that we've made some of these very early decryptions, the initial decryptions, if you like, the raw fragments of audio data that we passed on to our artists. We've made some of these snippets available now. So I'm going to just show you again our Bandcamp page for the release. Now, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. We've got the 4 decryptions from Chambers, Tim Marcus Moore, Cable 54, Reductionist, and GJ Hanna. And we've also added these 3 decoded fragments. These are examples of what our artists had to deal with. So, and if you give those a listen, you'll get a bit of a sense of the kind of challenge or the kinds of challenges that our artists had to deal with. So what I thought I would do, I'm going to play you just a little bit of a snippet of one of them, just to give you a bit of a flavor. So just bear with me a minute. Now, note that those particular decoded fragments will not be visible when you go to look at the release on Bandcamp. They're hidden from the general viewer, and we've very deliberately not made those available on Spotify or streaming services as part of the release. We're only making those 3 decoded fragments available to dedicated Clan Analogue listeners who wish to get the release via Bandcamp. And they won't be visible when you go to Bandcamp initially, but if you download the release, they'll be there amongst the files that you download. And there's good reason for our caution with that, because, which we'll talk about later in tonight's stream, in terms of some of the potential side effects from actually hearing this raw data that we've decrypted. Now, you may have noticed with that little snippet I just played that the volume was kind of phasing in and out. There was bits of silence and kind of fragments of sound kind of floating in there. And that's because we really had initially no way of correlating the frequency range of the ultra high resolution quantum audio to the frequency ranges that we are actually used to dealing with in the audio formats that we use. And we didn't know whether the scales of frequency, amplitude, etc. were logarithmic, exponential, linear, what kind of gradients that we were talking about as we calculated those. So we had to make a whole bunch of assumptions, and we're going to talk more about that as we progress onwards this evening. So, okay, so that's a little bit about the partial decryptions. Now, and I'd also like to really thank those artists that made it the effort to decrypt that data. And we'll talk a little bit more with Cable about what he actually went through in decrypting that. Now, what I thought we might do at this point in the stream is I'd like to play you a little bit more of the partial decryptions. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to put some download codes into the chat. Now, we just thought, because you folks are so good as to, on your Wednesday night, check out tonight's stream, we would put a few download codes as giveaways into the chat. Now, I'm going to copy across 6 of them, and I guess just grab one, give it a go. If you miss out on one, well, look, you know, it's only $7 to buy this on Bandcamp. So, but I will, while I'm doing that, I'm just going to play a bit more of one of the partial decryptions. This is the contribution from Chambers. So just bear with me. I'm just going to get that going, and then I'll put those download codes into the chat. Now, first of all, I'm just going to copy into the chat the web address where you can actually download the release if you get one of the download codes. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to give you a snippet of the first decryption by Chambers. Okay, I'm just going to fade that one out. That's a little excerpt from the first of the partial decryptions, that one decrypted by Chambers. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about the image of the future, the partial decryptions. Now, while we were decrypting the data originally, there was a piece of, I guess you would call it noise, data noise. It was first of all dismissed by our team as corrupt tricode. However, it steadily became apparent that this actually had a kind of regularity to it, and it was present throughout all the data. Now, we realized that it was some kind of metadata stamping algorithm that was, in a way, identifying the data set in totality. Now, as we examined it more closely, the words future security agency emerged. Now, we've done a lot of searching on this and haven't been able to find any trace of this organization anywhere on the net or through any registrations of businesses or anything like that. So we're really at a bit of a loss as to what the future security agency actually is. Now, if anyone watching this stream has any information that they could offer on this, we would greatly appreciate it. Perhaps you've got some theories that you could share with us. We're always grateful for any snippet of information. Now, along with the words future security agency, there was also an image, some kind of visualization in the data. Now, I'll just show you a little bit of what we were first dealing with here. And at first, we weren't really quite sure what to make of this. Was it some kind of a map, maybe? Let's just get that up on the screen. So was it some kind of map or some kind of architectural diagram, perhaps? Maybe I mean, yeah, I don't know. We weren't really sure what we were dealing with here, but after some further work, we came up with a sort of a kind of a bigger picture analysis of what this was, which we ended up putting onto the artwork of the Partial Decryptions release. And it looked like this. And we can see here, we've got some a kind of a bit of a geometric shape, some kind of patterning with the color scheme, and something that sort of looks like it's some kind of figure or of some kind of life form, perhaps. So that we're sort of wondering, well, maybe that was some kind of a logo. Maybe if this future security agency has a logo, perhaps this is some sort of representation. So that's what we've used as the image for the Partial Decryptions release. Now we have made further. Well, I'll talk a bit later on in the evening about the further progress we've made with our decryption effort. But what I would like to do now is actually bring in one of our team. As I said, we had a team of artists who were decrypting the data that we originally were able to pass on to them. And I was one of those artists, reductionist, but we've also got joining us Cable 54 from Adelaide. So welcome, Cable. Thanks for joining us this evening.
G'day, Nick. Hi, everyone. How's it going? The stream seems like it's pretty gone pretty well so far.
Yeah, well, I hope people are finding it interesting, and I'm certainly interested in what you have to say tonight about this project, your perspective. So, Cable, well, perhaps tell us what did you think first when we contacted you about this data?
Yeah. Well, you know, it was a little while ago. And I guess kind of like, you know, a lot happened with it, with this kind of like, you said you didn't really want to think about it as a project. I've definitely thought of it as a kind of project, but that's kind of, I guess, gone in kind of like twists and turns. And so thinking back to the very start, it just seems like a long time ago and so much has happened. But it was kind of like, you know, I just remember you coming to me and saying, you know, we know each other from my previous clan, my previous clan work, like the music that I put out. And, you know, I remember you saying, hey, Cable, we've got this weird thing happening. This guy has given us this information and we think it might become music. Maybe you can, like, I reckon you, like, could I help with that? And really it was, you know, I wasn't doing anything musical at the time. So so I just said yes, even though, you know, frankly, I had basically no idea what you were talking about. I just, you know, I just felt like because, you know, Clan's got a good reputation and you know, you'll make it along well. Okay, Nick, I'll help. That's how it started.
Right, well, we're glad that you did that. Perhaps I should just, before you tell us a bit more, Cable, I should just show the listener the release that you did release with Clan. When was that? That was 2017, I believe.
Yeah, a few years ago.
Yeah. So if let's just take a bit of a look at. I'm just going to jump over to once again share our Bandcamp page, but I'm just going to jump across to our releases, and then we'll scroll down a little bit. Hang on, where are we? Somewhere. Oh, here we go. So yeah, the Volca Galaxies release. So and part of the reason, Cable, why I asked you was because, you know, you clearly had the ability to realize the musical aspects of abstract sounds, as we can hear in this Volca Galaxies release that you put out some years back. So yeah, so it's great to have you on board with the project. Do you want to tell us how did you approach the decryption of the data? I mean, as we heard a little snippet earlier, it was quite an abstract bit of sound that we gave you, how did you approach the decryption process, if you like?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing was thinking about, what what I was trying to do, and what you kind of tasked us, each of us, individually to do, which was take those little scraps of, musical data. I think you kind of refer to it as, take them and see if we can decode them into something that was closer to its original form. Because what you explained to me was, you felt like this music, you and Duncan felt like this data had more inside it and could be decoded and decrypted and worked out and expanded and turned into something more like its intended or original form. So I really, that was like the top of mind for me. Like keeping that in my mind was the first thing. So my approach to that was really, like the first thing was to, just open up the old audio workstation on my computer and put in what we've got, or what you gave me, and see what it started to look like, see what some of the waveforms looked like. And from there, doing really basic stuff like, super time stretching the whole thing and listening to that. Did that seem like it was getting closer to something that was more musical, that I think we all recognize that it had the qualities that it had within it? And then, once it was time stretched, okay, what does that sound like? Is there a scrap inside there that actually sounds good that we can then repeat? Or was it about looking at the analysis of the waveform itself? For a while, I was applying some of this. I was applying these weird maths equations to some of the dots on the waveforms and seeing if there were any kind of numbers, and then inverting it. So I was just really throwing anything at it that was that I thought might be able to kind of shed some light on what this weird thing is, and kind of it's a bit like a puzzle trying to do it, and you don't really. It's like trying to do a puzzle, but you don't know what the end picture is going to look like. And instead of it being like a flat puzzle, it was, like an audio thing. And I've never done this before. And frankly, I didn't know what I was doing, Nick. And I feel like I made no progress for so long. That's the truth. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we were.
Yeah, you were doing it too.
Yeah. Well, okay. So why don't we have a bit of a listen to your decryption, and then we'll talk a little bit more about our processes with this. So I'm going to once again. Oh, hang on. Let bear with me a minute, and I'll just get your bit of your decryption effort playing.
Sure.
Fascinating stuff, Abel. And yeah, I mean, it's important to emphasize, I guess, to the listeners and viewers tonight that that aspect of the unknown and how we were correlating factors such as frequency, time, morphology, and amplitude, and so on. So yeah, the time stretching approach that you started off with was certainly a fruitful one here.
Yeah, got a bit closer to kind of getting it towards the, that getting it a bit closer to what we knew was really the pure version of it. But I don't feel like I really got close to that. Like with my version of it, it didn't really get close to it. But it was, it was interesting and it sounds okay.
For sure. Okay, so look, now we had, I mean, the different approaches were interesting. I mean, I recall one of the artists, I can't remember which one it was, saying that they were approaching it a bit like the mapping of energy flow and trying to look at the density of information and map that and track that and almost graph it in a kind of, I guess, a bit like sonification kind of approach.
Yeah. I think it's because it was such an open-ended, because we really, you and Duncan and the 4 or 5 of us really had no idea of any type of process, and it was such a weird type of, turn this data into music. We think there's music inherent inside it. We all tried different approaches, and we didn't really talk to each other during the whole process that much. But I think that I think that you can hear those different approaches in the in the result in the music, of us all getting partially through partially decoding it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly followed an approach of really trying to map sample, I guess, amplitude values and almost create a bit of it was spreadsheets and formulas galore, but trying to map all the different sample values and try to piece them together and match this sample with that sample. And we're dealing with ultra high resolution material. So it certainly did occupy a large chunk of last year, didn't it, for us all?
Yeah. It was big time.
Perhaps I'll play a little bit of the one that I did, just as a point of comparison. So as I mentioned earlier, my artist name is Reductionist. So I did one of the decryptions. So this is number 4. And I'll just maybe give a little bit of a teaser or snippet of it for the listeners.
Cool.
Okay, I might just fade that one out. But yeah, that's an example of the one that I did anyway. Yeah, and I guess it's also interesting to kind of note that we were filling in by guesswork
there's so much guesswork.
Yeah,
there was so much guesswork, so many assumptions.
And by doing that, I suppose we were all guilty to some degree of putting a bit of our personal inclinations as artists in there. Our best intentions were to realize the pure expression of this data. But I think for the partial decryptions, everyone bears the stamp of ourselves as artists as well, which maybe is not what we were aiming for, but I think
Yeah.
it needs to be acknowledged anyway.
Well, yeah, there was no way to be 100%. You know, there was no way to be 100% objective about it. That's kind of impossible because, you know, we're each bringing our own, you know, guessing and processes and skills to it. And, you know, I think the other thing is how, the other thing that kind of affected the sound was how, you know, how the decoding and how this whole process and how the data seemed to affect us, or at least, you know, I've talked to you a little bit about it. Yeah, how it seems to affect you and I on it.
Well, maybe we should start talking about that particular issue. I mean, I should just, as a little bit of background information, also note that our source that originally gave us this data, after we had commenced the decryption, we hadn't gotten particularly far at that point, but started to get very edgy and nervous and started warning us about some sort of inherent danger within this data and seemed to be fearing some sort of retribution. At least that was our supposition at the time, maybe from maybe the data had been stolen or something. I'm not quite sure, but it is more interesting in light of that to now consider some of the experiences that yourself, certainly myself, and anecdotally the other decrypting team members had. So do you want to tell us what happened with you as you're working on that decryption? What sort of effects did you find?
Well, it was I mean, that kind of makes sense what you're saying, like with the guy, you know, leaving. Yeah, because weird stuff did happen while I was working on this, and I didn't really know what to make of it to start with. You know, in the beginning, you know, what it was I was you know, I was working on the decoding, you know, just here on my computer in my house, and you know, in the evening after work, and then you know, usually I'd work for you know, an hour or two. You know, would be my normal type of process, and then go to bed. But then I'd find myself sometimes I'd be, you know, in the middle of that, and then I'd just kind of like zone out for a little bit, and then kind of when I came back to, and I'd, you know, been working the whole time, like 6 hours had passed, and I just like zoned out and continued working on this decryption for
I mean, some
like
people in electronic
about 6 hours or something.
Well,
and I've never had that. I've never had that type of thing before, and you know, and it didn't just happen once either. You know, it didn't just happen once. It happened, you know, like 3 or 4 times, and it was weird. I didn't really want to acknowledge it or even pay attention to it to start with because it was a bit scary. But yeah, that was one of the first things.
I mean, somebody would say that that's not unusual for the electronic music artists getting lost in their work in the studio, but did it go any further than that?
Well, it's certainly not normal for me. It's definitely not normal for me. Just as a side note with that as well, just another little bit with that. So I found that like when in those kind of like zone out sessions, those, you know, half a dozen zone out sessions, that was when I actually would make progress as well. And that's why I kind of have this, you know, just, I guess, this lack of clarity or around how I did that, because, you know, I was kind of zoned out a lot of the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was kind of how it started for me. And then it kind of got into other things, like even more than when I was working on it, just during the day. Sometimes I felt myself becoming like just super optimistic and just this weird emotional type of things, and just kind of euphoric at different stages in a way that is not normal for me, and I don't think is normal for people outside of when they're going to like a crazy rave or something. But for me, it was like I had taken some type of drug or something, and it was like that type of euphoria for like sometimes short periods of time, and it started happening when I was working on this and starting to listen to some of this decrypted music, and it stopped. This kind of stuff stopped happening after that project. The project stopped, and
Okay.
it was weird. I know we've talked about all my stuff. What about you? Because I know that you had some, but I can't really remember because we talked about it a while ago.
Yeah, I certainly experienced some strange things. I mean, working on the decryption and then going to bed and then waking up at some hour, 2 o'clock in the morning or something, and feeling an urge to actually spread nature throughout the street that I live in, and actually going out into the backyard, getting a spade, getting some pot plants, walking out the front of the house down the street, and planting plants in people's nature strips.
So this is the dream that you're having?
Well, I woke up in the morning and I thought, was that a dream or what was it? But then walking down the street to catch the tram off to work, and those plants, I had actually planted them in the night in some kind of trance-like state. And I'm usually a fairly straight-laced, law-abiding kind of citizen, and I just wondered, well, what if people pick that up on their security camera footage or something?
This stuff feels weird to talk about, but this stuff feels weird to talk about. But I think because it was happening, and I remember you saying that some of that stuff, like it was real.
And the other artists that worked on the decryptions reported some strange events too, but I don't really want to talk specifically because I think it's up to them to self-disclose, maybe at some point in the future.
For sure.
About that.
For sure.
But look, these strange occurrences are, well, okay. Maybe we should talk a little bit about the live performance that you did last year, because when we were first becoming aware of this, we weren't really sure whether we were imagining things or not, and we thought, why don't we conduct some kind of experiment under controlled conditions? So you travelled from Adelaide over to Melbourne and performed at Clan Analogue's 30th anniversary micro virtuosity event at 303 in Northcote, and you played live some of this Future Security Agency data, and we were really keen to observe amongst the listening audience whether there were any strange side effects or behaviors or anything like that. What were your recollections of that or your observations?
Yeah, it was originally I was like, when you suggested playing live, playing that stuff live, there was a the first kind of challenge was, or my first idea of why it would be difficult, or why I maybe didn't really want to do it, is because it was only, the music that we got, that we were able to decode, we were only able to decode part of the way. That was the first thing. The other thing was, because of this weird stuff that was happening to us, do we want to expose that to people? But then once I realized that, or do we want to expose people to it, and are some people not going to be able to, handle it, or, we don't really know what we're getting ourselves in for with this. But then I realized, I was really doing a cover version. The live versions of what I performed that night were really a cover version. You know, like I took the music and interpreted it onto my little, you know, the OPZ synthesizer. And so, you know, I thought that there was a really low chance of the whole thing having those kind of powerful, weird, you know, effects on people. And that kind of persuasion element that it seemed to have on you and me. So that's kind of like how I ended up feeling a bit more comfortable doing it. And I mean, everyone seemed fine on the night. We don't really know. You know, we didn't tell people, which maybe we should have, but we didn't. Everyone seemed fine. And, you know, I think we definitely took some precautions to really keep an eye on people to make sure that everyone that was there was fine and okay. I mean, who knows what was really going on in people's heads? And but I know that night for me, I didn't have any of those, you know, same type of, you know, persuasion, euphoric type of things, you know, other than having a few beers.
Yeah, well, maybe, I mean, this has been a bit of a journey, this whole future security agency decryption thing. We've just put together a bit of a graph just to kind of help people understand how this whole thing has unfolded. I'm just going to move out of the way a couple of the bits and pieces that are kind of covering up the information here. So just bear with me a minute on that. So so in 2021 we were contacted by our source with this data, and throughout second half of 21 and into 22 we were working on the decryption, and that with our team brought us to be able to release to you, the listener, the partial decryptions. So look, maybe it's a good time now to talk about the where we're currently at and the new developments that we're excited to be able to announce tonight. So first of all, look, we have to admit that early this year, as we entered into 2023, we were pretty stumped about making further progress. We knew we had made some progress and had been able to bring those partial decryptions to the listening public. However, it clearly wasn't the original unadulterated form of that data. And what was it really in actuality? From whoever originally created that, we were really not anywhere nearer to discovering. Interestingly, one of the benefits of being Australia's longest running electronic music label and electronic music artists collective, Clan Analogue, is that we are from time to time able to take advantage of grants, industry partnerships, development opportunities, and so on. So we were able to get access to one of the CSIRO's hyperqubit quantum computers with vastly exponential processing power compared to what we normally have access to. And of course, we didn't want to tell them all about this whole unknown data business. That would have kind of rang some alarm bells at their end, I'm sure. So we used the pretext of developing a new form of reverb plugin as an Australian export opportunity, and that was quite welcomed by them to allow us to use their computer. So now that enabled us to really crunch the numbers a lot more. And we found that there was a blockchain. There was some side chain noise discovered within the data, and that turned out to actually be an encrypted blockchain. So Duncan.
So this was you and Duncan working on it?
Well, not so much me. I mean, I'm not really the technical type, but
Okay.
but Duncan and his team.
Right.
Yeah, and that blockchain, we were able to crack it open by Duncan developing some proprietary cryptocurrency decoding software. And that was really the lucky break that we needed, and enabled us to really put the whole thing together to kind of finally assemble that 4-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. So we now believe that we have in our possession the completely decrypted Future Security Agency audio, which we're quite elated to be able to announce this evening. But we have to emphasize that we are hesitant to make this more widely available. We don't just want to put this up on streaming services and so on, due to both those warnings that we were given from our original source, and also the experiences that you've reported, I've reported, some of our other artists have spoken to us confidentially about. So we're going to shortly announce how we're going to make that available to a discrete, select, specifically chosen bunch of our listeners who can demonstrate certain criteria that they can that shows that they meet the ability to be able to hear this audio. So but look, before I do that, I will just show, because remember I spoke earlier about the image that we thought might be a logo of some type. Well, that we made, including within the decryptions of that audio, we made some progress in decrypting that. So I'm just going to show a couple of images in relation to that. So first of all, now let me see. Just bear with me a minute, folks, and I will find that image and we'll take a look at it. So this is what we were able to decrypt after we'd utilised the CSIRO's hyperqubit computer. Now you can see, compared to what we had earlier, there's a lot more detail here. There's still a few little imperfections, but we can see the words Future Security Agency are much more apparent. We can see that there's some kind of figure here, and these seem to be something resembling wing formations. So what we did is we passed this image on to one of our designers, and they had a go of an artist's impression of what they believed that this logo might actually look like were we to see it in the kind of settings where we see logos like business cards on the sides of buildings or whatever. So look, I'll just show what our artist was able to do with this. So let's see, here we go. So that's what our artist came up with as their kind of supposition of what it could, in its original form, actually look like. So look, once again, we are keen for any of our listeners who may know what this is to get in touch. You're welcome to even put any theories forward in the chat tonight. I mean, we're keen for, no matter how crazy it might be, any lead is worth following up on. And if you have an idea, please don't hesitate to just touch base, let us know. Questions asked, we just want to follow up on any lead. So look, okay, is this a good time maybe to see if anyone's got any questions? Maybe anyone in the chat might have some questions or ideas that they may want to float at this point. Let's see, there's a few people that are. Someone's saying this is getting a little freaky. Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose we try to take everything in our stride at Clan Analogue and just.
I was freaked out for a while, Nick. I was freaked out.
Understandable, for sure.
I was more freaked out than I told you for a while.
Yeah, yeah. Well. I mean, I'm hoping that talking about it tonight will sort of lessen the anxiety a little.
It was a while ago now, so yeah.
Yeah,
but yeah, it is it is strange for sure.
So someone on the Facebook chat is asking, "Are you sure it's safe?" That's Matt Brown's asking that. How do you feel about the safety, Cable?
Well, I think we're not. That's the thing. We're not sure. And that's that's why not everyone can listen to it. That's why not everyone can listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to take proportionate precautions, but we also don't want to. I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be a bit of loss to the world if we were to just simply say, well, maybe this is too dangerous, let's just delete the whole thing and forget we ever came across it. I mean, I feel like we don't have that responsibility either. I mean, we've got to kind of balance that and say, okay, make it available under some stringent proportionate precautions, but yeah, acknowledge that there is some degree of risk in this.
Yeah. Like, if people can't, like, there's a bit of a, I mean, we'll talk more about some of those kind of safety mechanisms in a second. Yeah, so we're not sure. Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, any other questions that anyone has at this point? Okay, so I wonder if we should talk a little bit about how we are going to make this available, under what sort of conditions we would make this audio available to people. And feel free to throw in any more questions as we talk about this. So basically what we are looking for now is capable volunteers who can go through an aptitude assessment process to determine whether they are suitable to hear this audio. Now Cable, you had a bit of a hand in designing this aptitude test. I mean, we had a meeting, the 5 decrypting artists as well as our IT team, and we came up with something that would assess people based on the criteria of musical competence, physiological and psychological aptitude, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we basically created like this small little AI chatbot that that, like Nick says, allows it tests people to see how suitable they are and how capable they are of being able to hear this music. And then after you've heard the music, it also tests you, the listener, if you've been able to listen, if it lets you listen. It tests you to see, have you had any of these effects starting to happen? And so that's this little AI chatbot that we've created that allows you to listen to the music and tests you to make sure that you're likely to be suitable to listen. So it's available for everyone to do and try. It won't let everyone, like, it's not going to be suitable, like listening to this, it's not going to let everyone listen to this, that's for sure. But
well, so nor should it, quite frankly.
no, for sure. But some people will, there's a proportion of people, we don't know exactly what that is, but there's a proportion of people that that it does let you hear it based on some of those questions in there. It's not something that takes too long. Like kind of, I think it got, it's a 15-minute thing, 10 or 15-minute thing. So yeah.
Okay, so I'll so we've just put onto the Clan Analogue website a I'll share the screen and just we can take a look at that. I've put a little link, so let's take a look at that. And now this is our homepage, clananalogue.org. And if I scroll down a little, we've got a link here, volunteers wanted to test future security agency audio. And I'll just click on that, and I might just copy this URL, and I'll put that in the chat. So to access the aptitude test, please visit this link. I'll put that into the chat, that link. I mean, you're welcome to just navigate straight over to clananalogue.org. And there's a bit of information there. And in there is the link where you can click to apply to do that aptitude screening. And I've put that link in there a couple of times. So, I mean, I guess I would recommend don't take this lightly. I mean, I'm suggesting you maybe don't want to jump onto this straight away. You might want to think about it, maybe sleep on it. Another thing I guess I would like to suggest is if you do get access to the full decrypted Future Security Agency audio following the completion of this test, maybe consider listening to it with more than one person around, maybe in close friend or family or something like that, just to kind of keep an eye, make sure everything's okay and everything's all right. We don't want anyone by themselves doing something a bit, I don't know, untoward or dangerous or whatever.
Pot plants in the front yard, Nick.
Well, yeah, anything like that. So, but look, if you at least we would encourage you to, and yeah, we just noted in the chat you will need a Facebook login because we're using Messenger as a platform for that. So you don't actually have to go fully onto Facebook if you're not into that, but just you will need to at least be able to access Messenger. And yeah, so any other questions or any points you would like to bring up, Cable, from your perspective?
No, not really. I think it's been
a lot of ground, haven't we? And perhaps we should show those slides once again, just to kind of make it a bit clearer to the viewers. So as I said, 2022, we were able to make available those partial decryptions. then the strange effects that we spoke about earlier were observed. We were, however, able to finalise the decryption earlier this year. And this is where we would like you, the listener, the viewer tonight, to help out and to get the word out more broadly to Clan Analogue listeners and friends that we are looking for assistance, both in terms of listening to this audio, reporting what effect it has, and also, as I said earlier, any information you care to share with us or any theories about what is the future security agency would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of summarizing it. I think I think people should try it, see if the AI chatbot lets them listen, because it's pretty cool if you do get to listen. That's for sure. And I think being responsible is good. Not sharing it around to people that if you do get to listen, I'd say listen by yourself rather than listening with a whole bunch of other people or someone else that hasn't been assessed. But at the same time, it's a bit of an adventure. It's a bit of an adventure. So keep an open mind. That's I think that's kind of how we got here, Nick.
All right. Well, we might finish off tonight's stream by having a little bit more of a listen to one of the partial decryptions. We had a little bit of a snippet of this one before, and we might just let that one play out for 10 minutes or so, and feel free to continue using the chat to post any questions or thoughts that you may have. But yes, okay, well, thanks very much for joining Clan Analogue tonight for tonight's stream.
It's been good to talk about it.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
it will be you're welcome, and it will be interesting to see how people what sort of reactions or impacts or effects that we can be reported from the listeners once we get a few capable volunteers on board. So just use that link that we've posted in the chat if you do want to check that out. And to all our viewers and listeners, many thanks for joining us. And we hope to bring you more Clan Analogue live streams later in the year. Might not be on this particular topic, but you never know. Thank you, Cable, and thank you, and good night.